Alrighty, Travis Wayne Goodsell, Part 2, with the top 10 reasons for Mormons to leave the LDS Church. Just leave. You know, hopefully if you are watching the second one, then you're considering it. Or you've already left the church and I'm just preaching to the choir. So, yeah, focuses on Mormons to leave. Those who've already left already chose the right. So I gotta put it on the screen for you. So, yeah, top 10 reasons why Mormons need to leave the church. Alright, number 6, polygamy, which is actually polygyny, many wives. Polygamy is a mixture of either multiple wives or multiple husbands and any of the combinations in between. Polygyny, more than one wife. Now, yes, I'm sure you've heard that Joseph Smith is accused of having gone after married women, forcing those women to be polyandrous, multiple husbands, as Joseph is multiple wives. But all those rumors are just that. They were part of the secret combination, which Mormons know what that means, don't you guys? To frame Joseph Smith in order to justify Brigham Young in establishing polygyny, spiritual wifery, in the land of the kingdom of Deseret, as he was now king. And so, critics, you need to understand that, because the church is lying in the gospel topic essays when they talk about polygamy and Joseph having multiple wives. They're lying still. Yeah, I've already covered that in the last video, that the church is still lying about lying. Alright, so, polygamy. Yes, Brigham Young was the one who started it, and when the government came in and said, okay, we're going to make this kingdom of Deseret into the Utah territory and then into the state of Utah, they demanded that the church give up polygamy, and they refused, and so the leaders of the church had to be arrested, and great disturbance. The church was almost destroyed. Not like it had already been destroyed with the murder of Joseph Smith, but no, the Brighamite church was almost destroyed. Oh, for the days, if it were. So then you have Wilford Woodruff finally getting up and announcing the church will no longer practice polygamy, even though it is the only way in order for us to get back into the celestial kingdom with Heavenly Father, who has multiple wives, and Jesus, who has multiple wives, etc., etc. And I think they still sort of practice the Adam God theory, that Adam was Heavenly Father. I'm not sure which one started to separate that. It may have been up until this time, because in 1890 the church gets started back up again after all the problems, and it seems like that's when the church started to forget about their dark past, and they start to move on and hope that everybody will just forgive and forget. However, Mormons were still rebellious, still practicing polygamy. And so, again, they were forced to end it a second time. And, oops, hold on. Hold on. Got multiple things going on at once, and I probably should just pause the video until I take care of this other stuff, so I don't make this longer than it needs to be for you guys, because, oh my goodness, Travis, you just talk and talk and talk. You have so much to say about the church. Yeah, I was born and raised in it. I know every nook and cranny they're trying to keep secret, that they don't want you to know. And so, yes, you know, volumes and volumes of books I have to spill on about the church. And as an author, it would really be nice to get back to that, but videos make it so much easier to do. So I end up going over all of it on videos. Okay, so second time the church finally did away with it. However, there was a split, and the LDS church got started along with several other branches. These were the Warren Jeffs clan that he derived from, and there's others, the Allreds, for example. These were the ones who continued to practice polygamy in violation of United States law. And so you can say that, well, you know, the United States that has the Constitution and the First Amendment is the freedom of religion. And as long as it's adults that are getting married, they are free to do whatever they want. And that is actually kind of true. So as much as you women are offended and horrified by the sharing of a husband, it's got a history, and so many people don't understand that. Abraham had Hagar and Sarah. Isaac doesn't indicate in the Old Testament that he had more than one wife, but he would have followed the tradition. And of course, Jacob, he had two wives, Leah and Rachel. Leah was the pretty-eyed one, and Rachel was the attractive one that he wanted to spend time with and wanted to marry at first. But Laban, the father, said, no, you have to marry my oldest daughter first before you can marry the youngest one. That's the rules. And so, yeah, he was forced to marry the one he didn't love. And Leah thought, oh, I'll just give him a son, and that will gain his favor. And so, yeah, Big Love is a great movie to watch in the sense that you get to see the contentions that multiple wives have in a relationship. They're not Mormon. They're a made-up fundamental group. But it's good to start getting a glimpse into the lifestyle that would occur under polygamous family life. And so, yeah, Jacob had 4 wives, 2 wives and 2 concubines, because they were servants to the wives, and thus, you know, you have to forced to breed with them too. Oh, tragedy. But yeah, women are uncomfortable with that in today's culture, and because we haven't been practicing that for many a decade. And so the concept is revolting and repulsive because of the way we've been raised up in our culture. But if you go back into the beginning of time, where survival is of a necessity, and having as many kids as you can obtain, not just to help protect the family, but to provide work for the family as part of the survival, obtaining food, and all that. It becomes necessary, and under those conditions, when your lifespan is around 50, if you're lucky. I think it was actually 40 back then, going back far enough. But yeah, and women often lost children, so they can't wait until they're in their 30s or 40s to have a token child right before they can no longer have children. When you're old enough to breed, that's it. You get going so that you can keep the human race alive and going. And so that's a completely different world that everybody today is unfamiliar with and do not understand. But nevertheless, we have no threats to the human race anymore, other than our own government trying to kill us in the air, the land, the water, and physical suppression and oppression. But the church still practices it today. What? Yes, they still do. You'll notice in the temple that they don't talk about the spiritual sealing of a man and a woman in marriage. In the covenant, the law of chastity is that a man and a woman shall have no sexual relations except with their husband or wife to whom they are legally wedded. Legally and lawfully wedded. So the world's definition of marriage, not the church's definition of marriage. So in the temple, the church is forcing members to comply to the world, the laws of the land. And that's because they were forced to stop polygamy. And so they don't talk about the celestial sealing. Now, women who have been sealed to a man and then ended up getting divorced according to the laws of the land, do you recognize and remember what happened to your sealing at the time of your divorce? That's right. You're still sealed to the former husband. It's not until you put in a petition for a cancellation, which is denied almost every single time, except under the conditions of extreme conditions of, the man being a criminal, to justify it. And so, yeah, women stay sealed to their husband after divorce. And yet the temple says, well, even though you're still sealed, you can no longer have sex because you're not legally and lawfully married to him anymore. But you're still sealed. See how they're trying to get away with the law? They're trying to do anything they can to screw the law and give the government the finger. They're also screwing you women over, because men originally didn't need to cancel the sealing, and they still don't, I think. They don't need to cancel the sealing to the other wife in order to get remarried to another woman. Thus the polygyny. But the woman, if she wants to get married to another man, guess what? you women know, you have to go through permissions and have your former husband give permission for a cancellation. Even if he's married, he has to give his consent for you to marry another man. If he says no, and the brethren say, well, he says no, sorry, you're out of luck, we're not approving your marriage. You're stuck in limbo with no legally and lawfully wedded husband to have sex with and thus have children with. But it's just, women are screwed in the church. I don't think you women fully understand the abuse that you are receiving at the hands of the church. It's just unbelievable how women don't get this. And they think, oh, but this is the way the Lord wants it, because the Lord runs the church, not the president of the church. It's always Jesus at the head. You guys are getting played. Jesus does not want that. He doesn't want to screw women over. Jesus loves women. Remember all the nuns that he's married to? Yeah, nuns, in order to become a nun, you get married to Jesus Christ. So Jesus, he's the biggest polygamist of all. Oh man, Catholics. So yeah, this is a serious one, and this is taking up the majority of the video, so I'm going to have to make the rest of them shorter. Or I'm going to have to go on to a part 3. So, yeah. Leave the church. You can't stay in a church that's abusing you. Don't give in to Stockholm Syndrome. That's where you fall in love with your captor or your abuser. So please, come on, people. You gotta leave when you're being abused. Do not let yourself be abused. Walk out. Run away. Leave. I don't care about your husband being abusive to you because you want to leave. All the more reason for you to leave him too. Yes, I'm encouraging divorce. If your husband's going to abuse you because you're doing the right thing by leaving the church, he ain't worth it. Likewise for men, the woman ain't worth it. If she thinks that the church is led by Jesus and that it's okay for her to be abused by the church, there's something wrong in her head. Get away from her. Okay, so this was, I should probably have dedicated this one to, so anyway, we'll see how the others go, because we've got 4 more to go. Okay, number 7, Murder, Death, Kill John Spartan from Demolition Man. Great movie. Talks a lot about moral behavior and how it can be corrupted in the guise of being moral. Yeah, good movie. Everybody should check it out because it's rated R. Mormons don't like R. They believe that Benson put a period after he said, "Don't watch R-rated movies," in his 1986 talk. He didn't put a period there, people. He used a prepositional phrase. Look it up. Okay, so murder. Yes, this has to do with Brigham Young, primarily, because, as I've gone over in many different ways and many different formats, Brigham Young was a part of a Freemason family, and they had a brand new Freemasonic temple built closer to where he lived. It wasn't too much closer, though if you're on a horse and buggy, it's a lot closer. And so it's believable that Brigham Young may have wanted to join that one. Why he didn't join the other one, maybe because of his wife, who ended up dying, which was why he then joined the church, because of her death. And so, yeah, the Freemasons in the early 1800s were furiously pissed off with the colonists for burning down their temples during the anti-Freemason movement of 1826. What was Joseph Smith later claiming he was doing that year instead of being involved in the sneaking out of William Morgan out of the United States, which then sparked the Freemasonic movement, the anti-Freemasonic movement? Well, Joseph Smith claimed to be visiting with Nephi on the hill Cumorah. Yes, Nephi. So, yes, do your research, go to the original source documents. The church changed it to cover up church history and called them Moroni instead. And so, yes, this is where you have motive for murder. If you've ever watched a cop show or a legal show, they always talk about motive. What is the motive for murder? And then at the last 5 minutes of the show, they finally violate the person's rights to the point where they crack and spill the beans. And yay, the case is solved. Justice is served by violating the Constitution. Yay! Watch them. Compare it with the Constitution. It's all about violating the Constitution. That's all they are. It's horrifying. You know, entertaining, but horrifying. And so, yes, that's why Brigham Young joined the church, because he was given the Book of Mormon by one of Smith's brothers, and not William Smith, Samuel Smith, I believe. And Brigham Young didn't join the church until after his wife died. And then he and Heber C. Kimball, who was best buddies with the family, and Brigham Young, they wanted to see Joseph Smith in person. They wanted to see the cause of this Freemasonic encoded book that talks about the threat to the United States, with the Gadianton robbers as the metaphor for that. And so Brigham Young joins the church, and he goes on missions. The first mission was to the Western New York region, where all of the the Freemasons whose temples were burned to the ground were angry and upset and wanted revenge. So those were Brigham Young's first converts. And then, of course, because Brigham Young went all by himself, Brigham Young, violating the commandment of the Lord to his prophet Joseph Smith about going 2 by 2. You know, he occasionally paired up with Heber C. Kimball, but for the most part, especially when he was seeing married women whose husbands were out working, and then having children report that, yeah, Brigham Young came over and then went upstairs with mommy and they shut the door and he didn't come out until after an hour and then he just left. That's why you go 2 by 2. Not so that you have somebody watching guard while you have sex with another man's wife, so that you have a witness to say, no, I didn't do that. That kid is lying. But even still, You see how the danger is of just having witnesses, and how it's important to get recordings and documentations and evidence that you were somewhere else. So yeah, Brigham Young was notorious for doing that over and over and over again. And then when he went alone on a mission to New England, or England, he again did the same thing. So, yeah, the guy is a real sleaze. If you're related to him, I'm sorry, that's who your grandpa or your third great grandpa is. Alright, so, yes, there's the motive. He wants to destroy the church responsible for the anti-Freemasonic movement that destroyed the Freemason temples. And so this new set of converts who were Masons, who want revenge, form a secret combination within the church. The Book of Mormon tells you exactly how the enemy takes over and destroys things. They start by first joining. They get let in to the organization. Then they put off the appearance of faithfulness, but they have a secret organization within the church. And this secret organization was called the Danites. They were going around seeking justice on their fellow neighbors who were involved in the anti-Freemasonic movement. And so they were burning their houses, they were looting, pillaging, plundering, murdering, etc. So there's the first murder, was this Danite group led by Brigham Young to murder the neighbors. And eventually it got to the point where the Utah War occurred, because the neighbors were fed up. We're sick and tired of these Mormons, not knowing that it was the Danites within the Mormons doing it. So Joseph Smith got blamed. And so, yeah, that was part of the reason why he was arrested after becoming president of the church. That caused the leadership crisis, with the Danites going to phase 2, rising up in leadership. And, just like in the Book of Mormon, they rose in position and power to obtain the lower judgment seats and working their way up to the chief judge, where the chief judge was murdered. And Gadiant Robber was put in as the new chief judge eventually. And so then you have Joseph Smith's murder, the ultimate conquest, taking over the church. You must kill off the leader to cause a succession crisis. And at that point, Brigham Young was then able to fool a number of people into following him as the new leader. And now, murder number 3, Brigham Young knew very well that you can't have saints crossing the pioneers during the wintertime. And Brigham Young was able to get that one old man who talked about it years later, and say that I trusted the prophets and the Lord preserved a few of us. It's led by God's, that's all propaganda, people. You have to have somebody like that justify murder. But that's what it was. It was murder. He should have helped everybody go at the same time, or have those who couldn't go the next spring or early summer. Because then you'd have the stations along the way better prepared, etc. So yeah, that was poorly planned. No wonder he's not the authoritative leader. And so you know people by their fruits. Brigham Young's fruits were spoiled and rotten and filled with murder. Okay, then Brigham Young gets into his new kingdom of Deseret and starts by murdering the Ute Indians and causing the Fort Utah to be built. I think it's Fort Utah, or what's now called Fort Utah. A fort was built down in Utah County, and all because they needed to protect themselves against the Indians who wanted revenge for Brigham Young causing the murder of their people. And so that's another murder. And then, of course, the infamous the Mountain Meadows Massacre. The Mountain Meadows Massacre was innocent people just traveling west, seeking a new land to raise a family and colonize the West. And Brigham Young ordered them murdered. Nobody dares enter my kingdom. And the church 10, 20 years ago finally confessed, and threw the bishop under the church at that time, posthumously. But they haven't excommunicated him. They just blame him now. And apparently everybody in the news media and those affected forgave the church. You know, what's your problem, people? Go after Brigham Young. He's the one responsible. You know, he specifically wrote a letter and dated it the day after, or 2 days after, actually. It was the 13th, and it occurred on 9/11, and it was supposed to vindicate him from any guilt association with the murder. You know, because back then you can do that. A couple of days, nobody will be able to do forensic evidence to determine whether it was on that specific date or if he did it on the 11th or the 10th. So, yeah, it's easy to deceive people in that case. You know, now we have digital thumbprints or fingerprints, so that can't be done as easily. And so, yeah, Brigham Young was responsible for that murder as well. And then, yes, there's more. He had people following him, yet he still was a bloodthirsty man. And he caused unloyal or disloyal members of the church who decided to follow him to be murdered. Now, he did this in two ways. One was through the governmental justice. So if you commit a crime, the death penalty is involved, and they would slit people's throats for committing crimes. And the other was through the religion, the temple. He established threat in the temple that if you violate his laws, his changes to doctrine, his new God, the Adam God theory, if you disagreed, the temple covenant that he put in was murder, suicide specifically. But of course, you know, overzealous members of the church, if they find a witch, they want to install justice immediately. So he provoked other members of the church that if the person isn't killing themselves, you do it to save their souls. And so, yeah, Brigham Young was bloodthirsty, and he was a horn dog pervert. And so with the time that I've taken on these two topics alone, we're going to have to make a part 3. So happy trails. I'll have to retitle the video.